All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic that's super relevant for any aspiring teacher out there, and that's the ABCTE PTK exam.
The Professional Teaching Knowledge exam, that's right.
Yep, and we're going beyond the basics here. We're assuming you've already got a good grasp of the fundamentals. This deep dive is all about those next level strategies, those kind of intermediate tips and techniques that can really make a difference.
Yeah, because acing this exam, it's not just about knowing the material, right?
No, not at all.
It's about having those test-taking skills and those smart study habits that can help you really shine.
Exactly. So think of this as your kind of strategic advantage, your secret weapon as you prep for the PTK. We're going to dig into the exam format, give you practical tips for tackling those multiple choice questions and those essays, and of course, share some effective study techniques.
Just to give everyone a quick refresher, the PTK exam has both those multiple choice questions, and then you've got 2 essay responses you need to write as well. And it's assessing your knowledge in some pretty key areas.
Right, the really important stuff.
Yeah, things like how you manage a classroom, different instructional strategies, your approach to assessment, and of course, that ongoing commitment to professional development.
It's really about showing that you're ready to step into a classroom and lead effectively.
Exactly. And of course, that passing score is the ultimate goal.
So that's what we're here to help you achieve. Let's dive right into the multiple choice section first. Now, I'm sure you've encountered plenty of multiple choice questions in your academic career, but as we said, we're focusing on how to approach these strategically for the PTK exam.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest mistakes people make with multiple choice is jumping right into the answer choices before they really understand the question itself.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that sometimes. So how can we avoid that trap? What does it mean to really analyze a multiple choice question?
Well, think of it like this. You wouldn't start driving without knowing your destination. Right.
Nope, you'd end up lost.
Exactly. So before you even glance at those A, B, C, Ds, take a moment to really dissect the question.
Break it down.
Exactly. What's the core concept they're getting at? What's the specific scenario? Are there any keywords that jump out? And most importantly, what are they actually asking you to do?
Like, am I supposed to identify something, apply a concept, evaluate different options?
Precisely. That's what I mean by analyze. Really understand the question before you move on to the answers.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's say we've done that. We've really taken the time to understand what the question is asking. Now we're looking at that answer choices. What's the next strategic move?
This is where elimination comes in handy. Even if you don't immediately know the right answer, chances are you can spot some that are definitely wrong.
There's obviously incorrect answers.
Right. Get rid of those, and instantly your odds go up. Even if you have to guess between the remaining options, at least you've increased your chances.
Like narrowing down the suspects in a mystery. Speaking of tricky answers, I know I've fallen for those distractors before. Those answers that look so tempting but have a little flaw or a twist that makes them incorrect.
Oh, those distractors, they can be sneaky. They often prey on those common misconceptions, or they might focus on a concept that's related but not quite right for that specific question.
Like, it's good practice in general, but not the best choice in that particular scenario.
Exactly. Pay close attention to those absolute terms like always or never. They're often red flags.
Okay, good tip. So we're analyzing, we're eliminating, and let's say we've narrowed it down to 2 choices. We're stuck. What do we do?
Well, this is where you really want to channel your inner teacher.
Think like a teacher.
Exactly. Think about that specific situation in the question. What would be the most effective and pedagogically sound approach in a real classroom?
Right, because the PTK exam is all about assessing your ability to apply those principles, those best practices.
It is. So if you're torn between a teacher-centered approach and a student-centered approach, for example, leaning towards the student-centered approach, that's often going to align better with contemporary pedagogy.
So it's really less about memorizing facts and more about understanding those core principles and how you'd apply them as a teacher.
Right on.
That's helpful. Now, of course, with any time exam, time management is crucial. What are your tips for making the most of our time in that multiple choice section?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to avoid getting bogged down on a single question. If you're staring at it for more than a minute or two and you're just not getting anywhere,
Move on.
move on. Mark it. Come back to it later if you have time. You don't want to waste precious minutes agonizing over one question when you could be answering others.
Makes sense. And as you said before, practicing under time conditions is really helpful for getting a sense of pacing.
Absolutely. That's invaluable.
Okay, so we've Covered some solid strategies for tackling those multiple choice questions. Now, let's shift gears to the essay section, which, as we mentioned, carries a lot of weight in the PTK exam.
It does. And, this section, it calls for a different set of skills. It's not just about recalling facts. It's about presenting your knowledge in a clear, organized, and well-written way.
It's about showing that you can think critically and communicate those thoughts effectively.
Yeah, and just like with multiple choice, it all starts with understanding the prompt.
Really dissecting what they're asking.
Absolutely. You want to pay close attention to those action verbs. Are they asking you to analyze, compare, propose a solution? Those action verbs will tell you how to structure your response.
Right, like what kind of argument you need to build.
Exactly. And don't overlook any part of the prompt. Sometimes there are multiple components to a question. Make sure you address every single one.
You don't want to miss any points.
Right. Now, when it comes to structuring your essays, the PEEL method is a really helpful tool.
I've heard of PEEL, but I'm not sure I fully understand it. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. PEEL stands for point, evidence, explanation, and link. So think of each paragraph in your essay as following this structure.
Like a little formula.
Yeah, in a way. So you start with your point. What's a main argument or idea you're making in that paragraph? State it clearly and concisely, then comes the evidence.
This is where you back up your point.
Exactly. You might use an example from your own experience, reference an educational theory, or even present a hypothetical scenario. But the key is to make sure your evidence is relevant and directly supports your point. Then comes the explanation.
So we don't just drop in the evidence and move on.
Nope. You need to explain how that evidence supports your point. Make those connections clear. And finally, the link. This is where you tie that whole paragraph back to the main topic of the essay.
So it all flows together nicely and stays focused.
Exactly. PEEL helps you build a strong, coherent argument.
Okay, I'm starting to see how useful that is. Now, besides structure, what about the writing itself? Are there any tips for making sure our essays are clear and well received?
Absolutely. Clarity is key. You want to use precise language, avoid those overly casual phrases or anything vague.
This is more formal, professional writing.
Yeah, think academic writing. And of course, grammar and spelling, those have to be on point.
They always count.
Always. Because it just adds to the credibility of your response.
Right. Okay, so we're clear, we're concise, we're grammatically correct. And like with the multiple choice section, I'm guessing practice is key here too, right?
Absolutely. Writing practice essays under timed conditions, that's the best way to prepare. It helps you get comfortable with the format, figure out your pacing, and really hone those writing skills.
And don't be afraid to get feedback on your practice essays.
Oh, yeah. Feedback is gold. Whether it's from peers, a mentor, an instructor, constructive criticism can really help you identify areas where you can improve.
Okay, so we've talked about exam format, some strategies for both multiple choice and essays. Let's move into study techniques now, specifically those that are really effective for this intermediate level of preparation.
Sounds good. So at this stage, it's not just about rote memorization anymore. It's about really engaging with the material.
Like taking it a step further.
Exactly. Active learning is really key here.
Okay, I hear that term a lot, active learning. But what does it actually look like in practice?
Well, it's about doing more than just passively reading or highlighting. It's about interacting with the information, manipulating it, making it your own.
So instead of just rereading my notes for the 10th time.
Right. Try explaining those concepts to someone else, even if it's just to yourself out loud. Join a study group and have discussions, debates, really get those ideas flowing. Create your own summaries, diagrams, concept maps, anything that helps you visually organize the information.
So it's about processing it, not just absorbing it.
Precisely. The more you actively work with the material, the better you'll understand and remember it.
Makes sense. Now, we've already talked about timed practice for both multiple choice and essays, but what about practice tests and question banks in general? How can intermediate learners use those effectively?
Well, at this level, it's all about the analysis. When you take a practice test or work through a question bank, don't just focus on getting the right answer.
It's not just about the score.
No. Really dig into those questions you get wrong.
Figure out why.
Yes. Was it a conceptual misunderstanding? Did you misread the question? Did you fall for a distractor? By figuring out those patterns in your mistakes, you can pinpoint your weak areas and focus your study efforts accordingly.
So it's almost like using those practice questions as a diagnostic tool.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk about flashcards and mnemonics. People often associate those with memorizing basic facts. Are those still relevant at this intermediate level?
I mean, they're helpful for the basics, but I'm not sure how they'd apply here.
Oh, they can absolutely be useful, just in a different way. You might not be using them for simple definitions anymore, but they're great for those key concepts, those instructional models, classroom management strategies, maybe the different stages of child development
Right,
theories.
the more complex stuff.
Exactly. And there are digital tools like Quizlet that make it super easy to create and review flashcards. And mnemonics, those catchy acronyms or phrases, they can be surprisingly powerful for remembering information.
Like a little memory trick.
Exactly. You could create a mnemonic to remember the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, for instance.
Okay, yeah, I can see how those could be helpful. Now, our resources also mention case studies and scenario-based learning as valuable tools. How do those fit into the picture?
That's where you really start to bridge the gap between theory and practice.
Yeah.
By analyzing real-life classroom scenarios, you're essentially preparing for those application-based questions on the exam.
The ones that ask you to think on your feet, like how you'd handle a situation.
Right. So look at case studies that involve student behavior, instructional challenges, assessment dilemmas, anything that might come up in a real classroom. Think about what you do as the teacher, based on those pedagogical principles you've been studying.
So it's like getting some practice runs in a safe environment.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Let's wrap up with some test day tips. What are those last-minute things we should keep in mind to make sure we're performing at our best?
All right. Well, first things first, get a good night's sleep.
I knew you were going to say that. Sleep is so important.
It is. A well-rested mind, it's just sharper, more focused, better able to recall information.
And don't try to cram everything in the night before.
Oh, definitely not. You're better off resting and letting your brain consolidate what you've already learned.
Now, what about the morning of the exam? Any tips for fueling our brains?
Yeah, definitely eat a good breakfast. Your brain needs fuel to function properly.
So not just coffee.
Coffee's fine, but pair it with something nutritious. Avoid those sugary foods that can lead to a crash later. Stick to something that will provide sustained energy.
Okay, good advice. And logistically, anything else we should keep in mind?
Arrive at the testing center early. Give yourself plenty of time to find your way around, get settled, avoid that last-minute rush.
No one wants to be stressed right before the exam starts.
Exactly. And most importantly, stay calm. You've put in the work, you've prepared. Trust in your knowledge and abilities.
That's such an important reminder. It's easy to get overwhelmed by nerves, but you've got to trust yourself and your preparation.
Absolutely. Confidence is a big part of it. Go in there knowing you can do this.
So to recap, we've taken a deep dive into those intermediate strategies for the ABCTE PTK exam. We talked about how to approach those multiple choice questions strategically, using analysis, elimination, pedagogical thinking, and of course, effective time management.
And for those essays, we discussed the importance of really understanding the prompt, using a structured approach like PEEL, writing clearly and professionally, and of course, practicing.
And we also explored some advanced study techniques like active learning, really analyzing those practice tests, the continued usefulness of flashcards and mnemonics, and the benefits of case studies.
We even threw in some test day tips to help you stay calm, focused, and energized.
Our goal has been to give you those practical tools and that extra boost of confidence as you prepare for this important exam.
We truly believe you can succeed.
Absolutely. So, as you continue your prep journey, here's a thought to consider. How can you integrate just one of these strategies into your next study session?
Yeah, what one small change can you make that will make a big difference? Maybe it's trying out the PEEL method in your next practice essay. Maybe it's explaining a concept to a friend. Maybe it's spending a little more time thinking about why you got a practice question wrong.
It's about finding what works best for you.
Exactly. You got this.
And we're here to support you every step of the way. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
Until next time.
See you then.